The text came through at 11:47 p.m., lighting up my phone like a flare shot straight into my chest. I'm moving in with my boss. We've been seeing each other for a while. For a few seconds, I honestly thought it was a joke. Some sick, tasteless joke sent at the worst possible time. My thumb hovered over the screen, waiting for the follow-up. Just kidding, or at least a typo correction. It never came. My name is Aisha, and for 5 years, I built my life around that man. His name is Hamza, the same Hamza who used to swear he hated office politics, who rolled his eyes every time I mentioned his boss, and who promised me stability after years of chaos. We weren't just dating. We shared a rented apartment, a joint savings account, and a future we planned down to the color of the curtains. Hamza worked as a project manager at a mid-sized marketing firm downtown. Long hours, tight deadlines, that was his constant excuse. His boss, Sarah, was always part of those stories. She's intense, he'd say, overbearing, obsessed with work. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? I trusted him more than anyone else in my life. That night, he wasn't home. He said he was staying late again. I remember reheating dinner for the third time, the food drying out as my patience did. When a message arrived, it didn't just explain his absence. It rewrote every memory I had of us. I called him immediately, straight to voicemail. I read the text again, slower this time. Moving in, not thinking about it. Now we need to talk. He'd already decided, already packed us away like an old project file. The words for a while echoed the loudest. How long is a while? Weeks? Months? How many nights did he come home smelling like a stranger and lie straight to my face? Our relationship had always felt balanced. At least I thought so. I supported him through promotions he didn't get, presentations that went wrong, and constant stress from work. I proofread his emails, practiced his pitches with him. Somewhere along the line, his boss started getting the version of him I thought was mine. I walked through our apartment, noticing things I'd ignored before. His wardrobe half empty, his laptop missing, the faint scent of a perfume I didn't own lingering on his jacket. None of it screamed betrayal on its own. Together, it felt planned. The most disturbing part wasn't the affair. It was how calm the message sounded. No apology, no explanation, just a clean exit, like he'd already moved on emotionally and was simply notifying me. I sat on the edge of the bed we shared, phone still glowing in my hand, and for the first time, a thought crept in that made my stomach tighten. If he could lie this easily, what else didn't I know? Looking back, the signs weren't loud. They were quiet, polite, easy to explain away if you wanted to stay in love badly enough. The first change was his phone. Hamza used to leave it everywhere, on the couch, the kitchen counter, even the bathroom sink while he showered. Then suddenly, it never left his pocket. If a notification buzzed, he'd flip the screen down instantly, like muscle memory. When I asked who kept texting so late, he'd shrug and say, work stuff. Sarah's intense, you know that. I didn't know, or at least I thought I did. Then came the late nights that didn't add up. He'd tell me he was stuck in meetings, but when I offered to bring him dinner, he'd panic. No, we're about to wrap up, he'd say, then come home hours later, oddly energized for someone who'd supposedly been exhausted all day. He stopped complaining about his boss. In fact, he stopped mentioning her at all, which felt stranger than before. Money became the next quiet crack. Our joint savings account, meant for a future down payment, started dipping for reasons he couldn't clearly explain. Office expenses I'll get reimbursed for, he said once. Another time, it was networking dinners. When I asked why reimbursements never showed up, his tone sharpened. Why are you interrogating me? That word stuck. Interrogating. As if transparency between partners was suddenly a crime. At work events, things felt off. I attended one company dinner with him months ago. Sarah was there, confident, polished, magnetic in a way that drew attention without effort. She barely acknowledged me, yet she spoke to Hamza like they shared an inside language. A glance here. A smile held a second too long. When I mentioned it later, he laughed it off. You're imagining things. She's like that with everyone. But she wasn't. After that night, Hamza started dressing differently. New shirts, better shoes, a cologne I didn't recognize. He said it was for professional image. I told myself promotions change people. Growth looks like distance sometimes. Still, the emotional strain crept in quietly. I began rehearsing conversations in my head before bringing up anything serious, afraid of sounding insecure. I slept lighter, waking whenever his phone vibrated. I hated the version of myself that checked timestamps and bank balances, but I hated the silence more. Every time I tried to reconnect, to plan a weekend away, to talk about our future, he'd deflect. Things are crazy right now, he'd say. Can we not do this? Do what? Be a couple? By the time that text arrived, the one that shattered everything, it didn't feel completely foreign. It felt like the last page of a story I'd been reading in denial. What terrified me most wasn't that he left. It was the growing realization that he hadn't just fallen into something. He'd been choosing it, step by careful step, right in front of me. The confirmation didn't come in a dramatic confrontation or a tearful confession. It came through an email notification that wasn't meant for me. 2 days after the text, I opened Hamza's laptop to look for our lease agreement. He told me he'd forwarded it somewhere. His email was already logged in, careless, or maybe arrogant enough to think it no longer mattered. At the top of his inbox sat a subject line that made my breath stall. Welcome home, red heart. Move-in details. The sender was Sarah. My hands shook as I opened it. She'd attached a copy of a luxury apartment lease, her apartment. His name was already listed as an occupant. The move-in date was weeks ago, not next month, not in the future. Weeks. There were screenshots of messages below, casually embedded like evidence in a trial no one warned me about. Can't wait to wake up with you every day. She still doesn't suspect anything, right? Once you move out, things will be so much easier. I felt something in my chest split cleanly down the middle. This wasn't a sudden affair. This wasn't a mistake. They'd planned it, quietly, efficiently, while I was cooking dinners and pretending not to notice the distance growing between us. Then I scrolled further. There were work emails too, performance reviews, salary adjustments, private calendar invites labeled strategy session scheduled late at night. Sarah had fast-tracked Hamza for a promotion that skipped 2 senior employees, one of whom I knew personally. In return, Hamza had forwarded her internal reports, client data, and project ideas that weren't his to share. Their relationship wasn't just personal. It was transactional. I slammed the laptop shut and immediately felt sick. Rage rushed in right after, hot, dizzying, uncontrollable. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to confront him and watch his face collapse. Instead, I sat on the floor, back against the couch, and laughed once, short and broken. 5 years. That's how long it took to become an obstacle in my own life. When Hamza came by later to collect the rest of his things, he acted disturbingly calm. No guilt, no panique, just impatience. You read my message, right? He said, avoiding my eyes. I didn't want to drag this out. I asked him one question, just one. How long? He hesitated for half a second. Long enough to know this is serious. That was it. No apology. No scam. Just confirmation that I'd been sharing my bed with someone who was already living somewhere else. Emotionally, professionally, morally. After he left, the apartment felt hollow. But beneath the heartbreak, something else started to form. A cold, focused clarity. They thought I was clueless, disposable, done. What Hamza didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I'd just seen everything. And once you see the truth, you don't just cry. You decide. For 2 days after Hamza walked out, I barely moved. The apartment stayed silent except for the hum of the fridge and the echo of everything I didn't say. I let myself feel it all. The humiliation, the grief, the hollowed-out ache of being replaced so cleanly it felt surgical. I cried until my head throbbed and my chest felt bruised. Then, on the 3rd morning, something small but irreversible happened. I opened our old savings app, the one I hadn't checked since the night his text arrived. The balance was lower again. Not by much, but enough to notice. A transfer, recent. His name attached. Even after leaving, He was still helping himself to a future we were never going to share. I stared at the screen, and suddenly, the tears stopped. It wasn't just that he cheated. It wasn't even that he moved in with his boss while pretending I didn't exist. It was the way he'd erased me from the equation, as if my trust, my time, my support were inconveniences he could delete with a tap. That's when the realization hit me, sharp and grounding. I wasn't grieving a man I lost. I was waking up from a lie I survived. I stood up and walked through the apartment again, but this time I didn't see memories. I saw evidence. Documents I'd helped organize. Emails bruffret. Notes from meetings he'd rehearsed out loud while pacing our living room. I knew his work life almost as well as my own. I knew which projects were sensitive, which deadlines were tight, which promotions were shaky enough to collapse under scrutiny. Hamza thought I was powerless because I was hurt. Sarah thought I was irrelevant because I wasn't on her payroll. They were wrong. The trigger wasn't rage. It was clarity. Clean, quiet clarity. I wasn't interested in screaming matches or messy confrontations. I wanted something better, something lasting. Truth. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. I named it simply Timeline. Inside it, I started organizing what I already had: dates, messages, financial records, shared documents. I didn't hack. I didn't steal. I only collected what had already passed through my hands during years of trust. Each file placed carefully felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. For the first time since the betrayal, my heart slowed. My breathing steadied. The panic faded into focus. I wasn't plotting revenge yet. Not exactly. I was preparing. There's a difference. Hamza had moved in with his boss, convinced he'd upgraded his life. Sarah believed she'd secured both a loyal employee and a discreet lover. Neither of them realized the same woman they underestimated was now standing up, quietly, deliberately, with nothing left to lose. And when someone reaches that point, they don't break. They become dangerous that I didn't rush. That was the first rule. Hamza and Sarah believed time was on their side, that the drama was over, that I'd retreat into embarrassment and silence. I let them believe it. While they settled into their polished new life together, I worked quietly in the background, turning chaos into order. Step 1 was proof. I revisited the timeline folder every night, adding to it with precision. Bank statements showing transfers from our joint account after he moved out. Emails Hamza had forwarded to himself, client decks, internal evaluations, strategy documents, sent late at night to an address Sarah had access to. Calendar invites labeled as work meetings that match nights he'd never come home. Nothing illegal. Nothing fabricated. Just patterns. Step 2 was confirmation. I reached out to someone I trusted, an old colleague from the same firm, careful not to reveal too much. Casual questions. Innocent curiosity. Within minutes, the picture sharpened. 2 senior managers had filed quiet complaints about favoritism. A project Hamza led had suspiciously mirrored a proposal rejected months earlier by another team. Rumors were already there. They just hadn't been connected. Step 3 was patience. I didn't confront. I didn't post. I didn't warn anyone. Instead, I waited for the right moment, because exposure only works when the audience is listening. And the firm's annual board review was coming up in 3 weeks. Sarah was under pressure. Hamza was being showcased as her success story. Perfect. While they played house, I refined the timeline into something undeniable. Screenshots aligned with dates. Financial records matched messages. Work documents traced back to their original authors. I practiced explaining it out loud, cutting emotion from my voice until it sounded like fact, not fury. Still, from the outside, Hamza looked untouchable. He stopped by once to collect a forgotten charger, wearing confidence like armor. "You seem okay," he said, surprised. "I am," I replied truthfully. He smiled, soft, condescending. "I am glad. This is better for everyone." I watched him leave without a word. Let him think he'd won. Inside, the tension tightened. One wrong move could make me look bitter instead of credible. One emotional slip could give him the upper hand. So I stayed invisible. I scheduled one final step, A private meeting request sent to the firm's compliance department. Neutral language, no accusations. Request to submit time-sensitive documentation relevant to upcoming review. No names, no drama, just a door opening. As the days counted down, Sarah posted photos online. Wine glasses, city views, captions about new beginnings. Hamza liked everyone. They looked untouchable, thriving, unbothered. That was the illusion, because while they felt completely in control, they had no idea the story of their success was already written, just not by them. And when the boardroom doors closed, there would be nowhere left to hide. The board review took place on a Thursday morning, 40 floors above the city. Glass walls, long table, bottled water no one touched. This was Sarah's arena, where she was sharp, admired, untouchable. Hamza sat 2 seats to her right, relaxed, confident, wearing the suit I once helped him pick out. He smiled when executives praised his initiative and loyalty. I wasn't supposed to be there. That's why the room went quiet when I walked in. The head of compliance had invited me personally after reviewing my request. I didn't look at Hamza. I didn't look at Sarah. I handed over a slim folder and said calmly, "Thank you for agreeing to hear me out." Sarah recovered first. "I'm not sure why this is necessary," she said smoothly. "This is a private matter." "It isn't," the compliance officer replied, already opening the folder. The screen lit up. Emails appeared, time-stamped, verified, showing confidential files sent from Hamza to a shared cloud account registered to Sarah's personal email. Calendar invites labeled strategy session, lined up perfectly with hotel receipts expensed as business dinners. A salary fast-track approval flash next, followed by a message from Sarah. "You've earned this." And us. Hamza shifted, just slightly. Enough. Then came the lease. Sarah's smile cracked when her apartment contract appeared, move-in date highlighted, weeks before Hamza ever told me. The words conflict of interest appeared in bold across the slide. "This demonstrates an undisclosed personal relationship," the compliance officer said evenly, "paired with favoritism, data misuse, and financial impropriety." Sarah tried to speak. Nothing came out. Hamza finally looked at me then, eyes wide, searching for mercy. He didn't find it. The final slide showed the bank transfers. Money pulled from our joint account, traced to expenses falsely labeled as reimbursable work costs. Fraud doesn't look dramatic. It looks obvious. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then the board chair stood. "This meeting is adjourned," he said. "Ms. Sarah, Mr. Hamza," remained seated. Security appeared, not aggressive, just final. As I turned to leave, Sarah's voice broke through the air, sharp and desperate. "You planned this." I stopped at the door and looked back for the first time. "No," I said quietly. "You did. I just told the truth." Hamza didn't follow me out. He didn't need to. His career ended in that room. Sarah's reputation went with it. Mentor turned liability, boss turned headline. By the time I reached the elevator, my phone buzzed with a notification from compliance. "Thank you for your cooperation." The doors closed, and as the city descended beneath me, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the betrayal. Freedom. The fallout didn't explode all at once. It rippled. By Monday, the firm released a brief internal statement. Violations of ethics and compliance standards. No names, but everyone knew. Sarah was placed on indefinite leave pending investigation. Her carefully built authority vanished overnight, replaced by whispered conversations and locked office doors. The woman who once decided everyone else's future suddenly had no control over her own. Hamza's ending was quieter and worse. His promotion was revoked before it was ever announced. His access badge stopped working. His company email disappeared as if he'd never existed there at all. The same colleagues he'd stepped over now avoided his eyes. He moved into Sarah's apartment, thinking he'd upgraded his life, only to realize he'd tied himself to a sinking ship. A month later, he emailed me, not to apologize, to ask for help. He wrote that everything had gotten complicated, that the investigation had misunderstandings, that Sarah was under stress, that the apartment felt tense, that maybe we could talk like adults. I didn't reply. Instead, I closed the account we once shared and transferred what was rightfully mine into a new one, with my name only. I signed a lease on a smaller place across town, filled it with light, plants, and silence that felt peaceful instead of empty. Something unexpected happened after that. People started reaching out. Quiet messages from former employees. A thank you from someone whose project credit had been stolen. Even a short note from compliance telling me my documentation had helped improve internal safeguards. For years, I thought strength meant enduring, staying loyal, giving chances. I was wrong. Strength is knowing when truth matters more than love. I didn't ruin their lives. I didn't scream or beg or threaten. I simply refused to carry their lies any longer. And when the truth stood on its own, it did exactly what it was supposed to do. Hamza moved in with his boss, believing secrecy made them powerful. It didn't. It made them careless. And here's the poetic part, the part that still gives me chills. They built their future on deception, and deception collapsed it. I built mine on truth, and truth set me free. So now I want to ask you, yes, you watching this, have you ever been betrayed by someone who thought you were too weak to fight back? Too trusting to notice? Too broken to stand up? If you have, share your story in the comments. You're not alone, and your ending isn't written yet. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with me. Because sometimes the quietest revenge is simply letting the truth speak last.